This bird is one of the widest-ranging woodpeckers in North America. So much so that it used to be split into two species. And they don't even act like woodpeckers. Maybe they should be called dirtpeckers. This is Colaptes auratus, the northern flicker. Flickers are larger woodpeckers, growing larger than your common downy, hairy, and red-bellied woodpeckers, though not as large as the pileated. Their plumage is also quite distinct, with a brown body, a black crescent and spots on the chest, a white rump, and either yellow, red, or orange feathers under the wings and tail. Males also have a black or red moustache, known as a malar. Previously, the northern flicker was split into two species based on plumage. Western North America has the chaffer group, the red-shafted flicker, and Eastern North America has the auratus/luteus group, the yellow-shafted flicker. These were two separate species in the past that differed by their range and whether the wing and tail feathers were red or yellow, and some sources still classify them as two separate species. However, in the Western Plains, you can find flickers with orange-shafted feathers, due to interbreeding of the two variants. And it turns out the genetic differences between the two are not enough to warrant separate species, at least according to most sources, including the Clements list, which is what I use for taxonomy. Northern flickers have a large range throughout Canada, the US, Mexico, and Cuba, many of which breed up north in Canada and then migrate south to the US and Mexico to avoid the frigid winter temperatures, as seen on this map. There are two other similar species of flicker that overlapped in range with the northern flicker, that you're most likely to confuse with this species. The gilded flicker, Colaptes chryssoides, is the most similar to the northern flicker, and overlaps in range in the southwestern US and northwestern Mexico. To differentiate these two species, note the red underwing and tail feathers in western northern flickers, while gilded flickers have yellow feathers, like the eastern northern flickers, which they don't overlap in range with. In addition, gilded flickers have more brown on the crown, unlike the gray on the northern flicker's crown. Cuba also has an endemic flicker, the Fernandina's flicker, or Colaptes fernandini, but this species has yellow and black barring, and is quite rare, so you're unlikely to confuse the two. There's also the Gila woodpecker in the southwest, but the barring on their backs is white and black, as opposed to the flicker's brown. In addition, they lack the spots on the breast. In eastern North America, you may also confuse them with the red-bellied woodpecker. But again, they have black and white barring and lack the flicker's spotted breast. Now that you know how to identify the northern flicker, let's get into one of the strangest things about these woodpeckers. Or should I say, dirtpeckers? That's because, while they do sometimes peck on wood to extract insects, especially during the winter, like how most woodpeckers feed, flickers are more often observed on the ground, pecking at the dirt. These birds prefer to forage on lawns, fields, and savannas by pecking at the dirt and using their long tongues to lap up insects, mainly ants. And flickers can consume over 5,000 ants per day. And while other woodpeckers, such as this pileated, may also have quick forays onto the ground to forage, none are more devoted to this technique than the flickers. If you want to attract flickers to your yard, put up suet feeders, and the most important thing to do is don't poison the ant mounds, as poisoned ants and other pesticides are one of the main proposed threats causing the steady decline of the northern flicker. This is due to biomagnification. However, it's not as magnified as the impact of DDT on bald eagles and osprey during the 1900s. For example, if a poisoned ant contains 1 unit of pesticide, then a flicker eats 5,000 per day. After just 1 year, If half of the ants the flicker consumes are poisoned, the flicker will have 1 million units of pesticide in their tissues, assuming the pesticide isn't broken down. And in most cases, animals can't break down these pesticides. Other proposed threats causing the slow but steady decline of the northern flicker include competition with introduced European starlings and human disturbance such as habitat loss and window collisions. Flickers, like all birds, are reptilian maniraptoran dinosaurs belonging to the clade Aves, which is split into the Paleognathae and the Neognathae. Flickers belong to the Neoaves within the Neognathae, within which they belong to the Afroaves clade, along with owls, hawks, kingfishers, and the other woodpeckers. Within the Afroaves, woodpeckers belong to the order Pisciformes, which is sister to the kingfishers and bee-eaters of the order Carassiformes. The Pisciformes also contains the jacamars, toucans, barbets, and the honeyguides, which are sister to the woodpeckers of the family Piscidae. Piscidae contains 34 genera and over 230 species. The northern flicker, Colaptes auratus, belongs to the genus Colaptes, which is suggested as sister to the South and Central American woodpeckers of the genera Psiluis and Pisciolus, with that clade falling sister to a clade containing the Dryocopus woodpeckers, including the pileated. Within Colaptes, the northern flicker, Colaptes auratus, appears to be sister to the gilded flicker, Colaptes crasoides, with that pairing falling sister to the Guatemalan flicker, Colaptes mexicanoides. Like most woodpeckers, northern flickers excavate cavities in dead trees and build their nests inside. Both the male and female are involved at all stages of nesting. However, unlike most birds, the male contributes more than the female. Pair formation begins in spring when birds arrive at the mating grounds, and then work together to excavate a new cavity, though in some cases they may reuse a prior cavity. And on average, northern flickers lay a clutch of 7 to 8 eggs, and both sexes develop a brood patch, so both take part in incubation, though the eggs hatch after 10 to 12 days. Nestlings are small and blind and fed by both parents. The nestlings fledge roughly 25 days later and are occasionally fed by the parents for roughly 16 days, with the male continuing to care for them longer, while they learn to fly and forage by themselves. Northern flickers are preyed upon by the usual suspects, such as hawks, falcons, owls, raccoons, etc., with squirrels and weasels being major nest predators as well. Birds first diverged from the other dinosaurs sometime from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous, as the border between non-avian and avian dinosaurs is debated. The Neognathae and Neoaves both diverged during the late Cretaceous, while the Telluraves, or core land birds, then diverged during the Paleocene, roughly 62 million years ago, with the Afroaves splitting shortly afterward. The Pisciformes split from the Carassiformes during the Eocene, roughly 50 million years ago, and the woodpeckers of Piscidae emerged roughly 26 million years ago, during the Oligocene. The genus Colaptes is estimated, via cytochrome B analysis, to have diverged roughly 6 million years ago, in the late Miocene. And phylogenetic analyses, using a molecular clock analysis of cytochrome B, estimate the divergence of Colaptes auratus at roughly 2 to 3 million years ago, during the Pliocene. And the fossil record supports this, with fossils identified as Colaptes auratus being found in Pleistocene deposits in Florida, California, and Ohio. Throughout their range, Colaptes auratus also overlaps with the pileated woodpecker, and their calls are often heard echoing through the forests, and may be easy to confuse with each other. Here's the northern flicker's call. And here's the call of the pileated woodpecker. You may also see a flicker drumming on a wooden telephone pole, a stone building, or some metal structure. And your first thought might have been, "Damn, that bird thinks that building is a tree. It won't find food there," and may have determined that the bird was making a dumb mistake. However, birds aren't stupid, and that flicker likely wasn't looking for food at all. Instead, they know that drumming on metal makes more noise, and do it on purpose, to let nearby birds know, "This is my territory. Stay out. See how hard I can drill?" And the louder the drum, the further it travels, and the stronger the woodpecker appears. But how do woodpeckers not give themselves a concussion when they're banging their heads on trees and buildings so rapidly? It has long been hypothesized that the spongy bone in front of the brain, or the connection to the tongue, which wraps around the skull, acted as shock absorbers. However, recent studies have doubted this due to analyzing videos to estimate the amount of shock absorbed. But instead, they found that the spongy bone area does not compress, and if the shock was absorbed, the woodpecker would need to peck even harder. So how do they not get brain damage then? Well, via analysis of the force generated when a woodpecker pecks, researchers determined that the size and shape of the brain and skull means it doesn't experience the same compression and force due to inertia that a human brain would experience if they were to bang their head on a tree. When a woodpecker pecks at a tree, the shape of the beak and its outer layer of keratin, called the rhamphotheca, made of elongated scales, dissipates pressure via shearing, which is absorbed by the middle foamy layer and channeled around the skull by the dense middle layer, and the shape of the skull, including the hyoid tongue bone. The pressure waves are then directed down to the strong neck muscles, which deal with the force, therefore protecting the brain from any direct pressure. So every part of their skull has specifically evolved that way to protect their brain. The northern flicker is an incredibly interesting species. Until next time on Animal Analysis. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on which animal we should analyze next, and maybe check out one of these other videos.